Okay.
So that's going now. And I'm going to start the garage band.
Do
Yeah.
this.
All right. Welcome to the Discovering God podcast, where we're taking discipleship online and where we're creating a space for people to come face to face with God by coming face to face with His Word. And so we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Rip, and we all live here in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area. And I'm here with, well, my friends, but you're like my kids, and one of you is my kids. But let's start down in the end and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Noah. I'm 24 and kind of grew up in the church. Grew up around Rip and his family. We're all kind of family and friends. And just, kind of getting more curious and getting more into the serious stuff of...
Be close to the...
Like this?
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, just getting more curious about the more in-depth conversations and kind of how it applies to my life today. So
Cool. Kenna.
My name's McKenna. I am 23, and it's my best friend. We grew up together, and we basically kind of started the whole thing, kind of just being, exactly what Noah said. We were curious about stuff and wanting to grow more with our relationship with God and our walk with God. So,
I'm Kaylee, and this is my dad, and that's my best friend. And so I'm 22, and I think I grew up in the church, and I always had a relationship with Jesus, but as I got older and became a young adult, I wanted to I wanted it to be my own, and I realized I just kind of was going off of the stuff that I learned in Sunday school and would learn at church camp and stuff. Not that any of it was bad, but I wanted it to be more of an intimate relationship and just have something of more substance, I guess. And so through conversations with Kenna and being more curious and having so many more questions about you think you know one thing because that's just what you were raised with, but you're like, what does it actually mean? And asking so many of the why questions. Why is it this way? And so we just started to question things more, and we turned to my dad and just was like, hey, any interest in kind of helping us out with this stuff and helping us know how to read the Bible more and have a closer relationship with God? How do we do this? We can't really do this by ourselves, so...
Yeah, so we're sitting, that kind of started when we were sitting...
was that a year and a half ago?
Something like that on Halloween night, in your driveway next door, right? And what did you say to me?
I was just like, can we just talk sometime?
Yeah.
I felt like I was kind of in a confused place in my life and wasn't very I didn't have a good connection with God at the time. I just knew I wanted that. So
Yeah.
and our conversations, constantly just talking about stuff, just made it a fun thing when you do something about it.
So I remember I offered you guys, we can do this one of two ways. Remember that? I said, we can, I can just kind of Q&A with you, or I can, and you can fire off questions, but it's really not going to give you a basis for why is the Bible an authority? Why is the Bible the thing that we want to follow then? And out of that follow God, it's I could Q&A for you, or I can show you how the Bible works and walk you through. And it's really what it is it turns out that it's what the church and the Bible had referred to as discipling people. And you chose that part, which I was really pleased with because I thought that's the better choice. But what's interesting is we're not a church, but what we started to do was we just started to meet and go through how do we approach the Bible, and it hasn't morphed necessarily. There's a few others that join us now. It actually started with the two of you. Then Noah came in, which was great. Gabe came in, Lexi came in, and Addie and her friends. I mean, they would sit in on it if they didn't have school apparently, but they'll probably sit down on they'll probably join us in some of the podcasts here and there. So what we figured was, let's also take what we're doing and kind of do it on a podcast. So if you don't mind, I'll bring in some of my own little story quick. It's like, when we had the church, I was thinking, I want to do some kind of podcast somehow. And
Our church, right?
Our church, yeah. When we were leading the church, I had this bug, like an itch to scratch about like a podcast, and I didn't realize that it was some expression of a creative outlet in its own way, until we closed the church, but which was fine, and God was using it to speak that way to me. He's like, it's a creative outlet. Oh, anyway, so I kept having this thing, but not knowing how to do it. And at the end of our stuff tonight, I'll give a little bit more of that background. But what happened was, it just started to become, what if we create the space online for what we're doing? Because Noah, remember how you and I would talk at work? And I would ask you about, is it that you're disinterested in God, or are you disinterested in church, right? What was your answer?
Well, me and like the older youth, age like 20s, it was just a disinterest in, like the idea of church, like going to church, going to a building for an hour and a half every Sunday morning, and kind of the routine part of it, which was kind of all people our age look at it as.
Yep.
So
kind of just going through the motion,
yeah,
obligation to go, and what are you really getting out of it?
It's not, yeah, that's the unattractive part, and that like nowadays people our age are kind of, I feel like, a lot more independent, kind of, and doing what they want.
Yeah.
And it's not the idea of that we don't want to have anything to do with God. It's the I guess regimented, like, oh, well, this is what I grew up doing. This is what my family's been doing for generations, and I have to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And to be clear, we're not actually here doing this as a thumb in the eye at church and any organized church. You guys know, because what I've been taking you through, like, I still love the church, right? And it's got a huge value. But what we're kind of doing is realizing there doesn't necessarily have to be an antagonistic relationship between people that don't go to church and people that do go to church. Like, most likely, the majority of people are remember we had talked about this, like, most likely the majority of people, whether you're your age group or not, are not antagonistic to God or faith. They might be less interested in church, but they actually are probably still interested in understanding God and being, like, knowing Him. And we kind of realize that seems to be what's happening in our group. Like, we're getting to know God by getting to know His Word. And so we just figured that's probably what we can do the podcast as, is like, let's do that. And so one of the things that I've kind of phrased it is, for those that are far from faith. Doesn't mean you're disinterested, doesn't mean you're antagonistic. We're looking to create a space that we're modeling a learning thing in a podcast as opposed to any other formats, where people might just connect to the format that we're doing and the content that we're going to do. And they might see themselves in that and go, yeah, I'm actually interested in that still. What do you guys think?
I feel like it's also been helpful in doing these things to offer a different perspective on kind of how we view the church and stuff, and that it's not like going in with a change of heart is what I think is really important too, and not just having this like going in with a routine or whatever, feeling obligated, but like wanting to go and wanting to be a part of it, wanting to have this community. And I think that change in perspective has been like a huge blessing. So.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm not spiteful or against going to church.
Right.
It's just the difference of going to church because you have to and wanting to grow closer with God.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This feels deeper to me too. Like, in the way I'm able to ask questions when I want to, or anything like that. Talk to you guys about anything. It's just more like I learn more.
Yeah.
Better that way.
The when I was a kid, we would have said, "This is just more organic." I don't think you guys use that phrase much now, do you?
No.
Right. But that's, it would have been, "Oh, this is just more organic." And it's like, but I think the Bible refers to it as, in a sense, like doing life together.
Right.
Knowing God and having God conversations doesn't come only because we sit in church on the weekend, but it would come because we were sitting around doing life together, and we came on to another conversation about God, and it turns out that that's life-giving, right? And it's enjoyable in the midst of, doing the normal things of life, not just marginalizing out time for church.
Yeah. 'Cause I think that's also church. Like this, in a sense, is church.
Well, remember when I told you guys, like, I kept experimenting with things downtown in Lancaster, like how to go share. We would try all kinds of different things. And one time, I was just on a Sunday morning, I was in the coffee shop with someone else from church at the time. And because we did church on Saturday night. And so we were there and we looked at this group of young people. There's like 6 or 7 of them. And they all came in and they were hugging each other, getting their coffee, sitting down, just talking, whatever. And they sat there for like 45 minutes laughing. And you could tell that they deeply loved each other and cared for one another. And they were enjoying their company. And all of a sudden, they just got up and left. And I looked over and I said to the person who was with me, I said, "What did they just have?" I don't know. Like, in its own way, they just had church. And it was because it was beautiful what they had, right? That community element of church that we do want, they had it there. Now, they didn't worship God, like with song and different things. They weren't sitting there opening the Bible and so forth. They weren't even having an off-the-cuff conversation about God. But in its element on the community side, one of the 3, they ended up having church, and it was like, wow, that's so cool, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, probably sometime down the line in the podcast, we will get to the conversations of what does the Bible say church is, and why does that matter? Why do we still want it, right? So let's do our thing. What do we have here?
13 minutes.
Okay, let's do our thing.
13 minutes
Let's
left.
do our thing.
Yeah.
We're going to start just for a few minutes. We got to actually, I should have been a little more prepared. You're going to turn to, here we go. Joshua chapter 5.
It's like a thing for us to find it first.
Yeah, probably.
Well, what do I always say? Like, you can't bring your digital Bible, right? I mean, you could, like, not hard-nosed, but
The paper does it best.
paper is, we're going to bring our paper Bibles.
I win.
Joshua chapter 5.
I didn't even find Joshua in there.
Okay, so it's going to be Joshua chapter 5, verse 13 through 15, the end of that chapter. Whoever's there, just pick it up and read it, and the rest join in. The rest, go get to it when you get there. Someone
When
jump on it.
Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us, or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped. And he said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so.
All right. So, think about this for a minute. What do you think this means?
We go barefoot.
It means we can go
Set.
barefoot.
Yeah.
Means we should go barefoot. Okay. Yep. What else do you think it means? Long pause online. Jump in there with something. It's fine. Go ahead, Kenna.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Okay.
It just seems like he, almost like when he knew who this person was, that it wasn't against him, he immediately, like, almost like felt the presence of God or something, like, it came over him.
Yep. Yep.
Was he in the presence of God, like on holy ground?
Well, there is
Sense.
that dynamic there. To be in the presence of God is to be in holy space, on holy ground. Yeah. Now, Noah, you joked about, we get to take off our shoes and whatever.
Yeah.
We get to go barefoot kind of thing. And that we all, knowing you, we know why that,
I only wear shoes when I
relates
have
to you.
to.
Exactly. So here's the thing. Remember, when we started out, there are two approaches to the Bible. The one approach to the Bible is basically human focused. And when we look at the passage, anything in the Bible, without realizing it, our human tendency is to think and express an answer in terms of something that relates to me. What I mean is that our approach to God's word is typically that this is about me. The downside of that is that it teaches us that this is all about us. It creates a human-centered, sort of a narcissistic approach, right? It's all about me. It also sets us up for a very works-oriented relationship with God. Meaning, so what? I got to take off my shoes when I'm in. What do I have to do when you're around to get you to be nice to me? I want to know you, but what do I have to do to ensure you'll give me my goodies? Or to ensure that something, and that whole thing turns into a works about me. There's another side of, let's call it a theory or whatever, approach to the Bible. And this is one that I've come to understand and I agree with, is that when we come to the Bible is first a revelation about God. Without that basis, the Bible has it has no authority in our life to inform us of where we need a Savior. Because it has no ability to be an authority to identify how my life is not lining up with God's command. Does that make sense how I said that? It's worth thinking about,
Yeah.
right? So when it's a revelation of God, then we begin to understand who God is, what his nature is like, what he does in decision making, and what commands he's asked for and laid down. And what it does is it highlights whether or not my life aligns with that. So that where it doesn't, I'm the one left on the hook of responsibility to make the choice. Will I ask God's forgiveness? Will I ask his help to change? Will I acknowledge and express humility that my life doesn't line up with that and I need help? That's what it does when we approach it as God. It's a revelation of God first. But then we also need to be able to think about then, how will it apply to my life? So let's take another couple minutes just to think through, what does this show us about God? And then we can think about a couple areas that this applies to life in general. Now, here's a little background. they had just been wandering, the Israelites had just been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years because they sinned before and disobeyed God's command to go take the land. So they were wandering around. Now it's ready again. And now God's saying, now we're going to go in. And he keeps telling Joshua, Moses is dead. Now you're the leader. Take heart. I'm going to be with you. Do not be afraid. And all of a sudden, Joshua's here and he's looking over Jericho, which is in the land of Canaan. It's the one of the first places they have to go take. And he's looking it over, and all of a sudden he sees this warrior. And he walks up to him and he goes, are you for us or for our enemies, those guys over there? And this dude says,
no.
No, meaning neither. Now, if I would think, now you can agree with me, but think about this. Based on what I just told you, and there's a lot more we could unpack, but based on what I just told you, I would think that if it was God, he would be sitting there saying, and by the way, it was God, but I would expect God to say, Joshua, I told you before, I'm with you. Now I'm here in human type form. And so that you'll know that I'm with you and for you, I'm going to fix this thing so that I'm going to rig it so you win. And I would think he'd be saying something like that. But instead he's like, neither. I'm not for you and I'm not for them. He's like, I stand here as my own authority and power. Excuse me. And he's basically, the question then becomes over to Joshua. I don't take sides and I'm not beholden to anyone. The question is not whether I'm for you. The question is, are you for me? Because that's almost implied here. I'm not taking your side. You decide whether you're on my side.
And he did by taking his shoes off, right?
Bingo. That's a great observation. Because what if he said, take your shoes off, and Joshua was like,
Why? Or if he even asked why.
Exactly. So the shoes was a sense of surrender, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bingo.
He knew he was on holy ground.
But Joshua didn't know that was God standing in front of him.
It says the commander of the army of the Lord. And the Lord there is capitalized, so it's Yahweh, right? It means master, but it's Yahweh, the Almighty, the one. And so it's like Jesus. Some see this as Jesus incarnate. Pre-incarnate is what you would call it. Okay? But it is as a revelation of God, it's God saying, I don't do things at the beck and call of humans. The question is, are you on my side? At the expense of the other's side. Right? What does that seem? Well, how does that come off to you now? Like Noah's kind of got a glint in his eye about like.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. It's cool. I've never dug into that passage like that before.
So now, that's the revelation of God. How might this apply in life? In our day today. So what we're supposed to do is not inject the 21st century mind into the Bible. We're supposed to let the Bible speak for itself and then consider the ways that its instructions, its revelation, will inform our day today, the world we live in today. That's how truth relates, right? Can you think of anything off the top of your head? Because I got an idea, but what do you guys think?
I think like asking ourselves the same question that God asked Joshua, like, are you for me?
Okay.
Not, am I for you? Like, just asking, looking at our own lives and like how can we say, yes, I'm for you, and not just say it, but show it
Okay. Yep. Anything else?
Or just praying and always asking for things and wondering when God's going to do it for you, kind of. Like
Yeah. When are you going to give me
it's
my
not
goodies?
Him for us in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, yeah.
Yep. How about, here's one that I always see this applying in personally. How about politics? Think about this for a second. In American politics, as I was growing up, Democrats felt like they had the moral high ground because they helped poor people. They were sort of seen as the we help the poor in society, right? Republicans, on the other hand, they see themselves as God's political party, so to speak. Do you know why? Any guess? Roots. Well, roots. Because they stand against abortion. And so the Republicans will sit there and go, well, God must be on our side and for our platform, and I'm God's chosen man for president, so to speak, because we are the party against abortion. And then they think they have the moral high ground somehow. And then the Democrats will say something similar, but on the grounds of, well, we help the poor. And you know that's in the Bible too, so to say. And it's as if God is saying, I'm not beholden to either one of you. The question is not whether or not I'm for you. The question is, are you for me? Does your platform totally represent my word? Both of their answers would unequivocally have to be no. And it's like God is saying, I'm not for you in that. I'm not going to choose sides. I don't respect you, Miss Democrat, over you, Mr. Republican. You both have a good part, but you also have your faults, right? So because of that, Gabe, we're not going to stop it right then. We're going to let the audio go for a minute. So you get how that applies. Like, so meaning if God's not choosing an enemy, then if Kenna's a Republican and I'm vote Democrat, but we both profess Jesus as Lord, should I be arguing with her or loving with her? I should be honoring her in the difference and not arguing for who's right. Correct? Because God's not choosing either one of us in that regard.
People forget that. Yeah, for sure.
That's why the conversation is a bit relevant. That's one of the reasons I brought it up, you know? Okay, so final thoughts to any of that, to what we've talked about, to this as an application, whatever.
I will say that learning how to read the Bible, like the first time you taught us about like how to do it in the correct way and get the most out of it, has helped us, all of us, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
Like, we'll read something and it'll be completely different than what, like, if we actually take the time to sit back and like try to learn what does it say about God versus just in brains just like reading it and taking it as it is, and for us
Like
it
literally
changes
speaking.
things. Yeah.
What it's saying. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, like I couldn't tell you how many times, probably dozens and dozens of times I've read that passage, but I've never
Right.
thought about it or had conversations about it like this before, and it's kind of just, I guess, refreshing and
Changes things.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because you can just like literally take what the Bible is saying word for word and translate it to your own language or what you think it means, but it's not supposed to, that's just not what we're supposed to do. We gotta see what God is trying to reveal about himself in this. And I just like that in the times that we've done this, we have brought up relevant topics. Like, we're not just kind of even talking about like our own Christian lives. We're talking about like just things of this world that we live in, and why it's important, and that it's not always like what we think it is. Like that. God is for one party and not for the other. Like God has no like